97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
I love coaching this football team. I love coaching those players in there.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Yes, Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you on a Friday edition by our friends over at PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250. Go to PlaySugarHouse.com. Win real money with their sports books, along with casino games for the comfort of your home. Must be 21 or older to play. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Often imitate it, never duplicate it. Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN. Geoff Mosher on a Friday. He is the host of the Inside the Birds podcast and Inside the Birds pregame show, which you can check out tomorrow starting at 10 a.m. with Jeff, Adam Kaplan, Trey Thomas, and Greg Cosell. Jeffrey, what's going on, man?
Hello, Mike. Hi, Hunter. How you doing? I'm excited for this weekend. I am excited for the Inside the Birds live pregame show. I've obviously been a big part of writing the script, and I think we've got some really fascinating stuff. Trey Thomas put together a video on what he's seen out of Carson Wentz and his struggles, and he's also put together one on the monster game that Jason Kelce had that kind of flew under the radar last week. Jason Kelce was definitely eating his Cheerios in the morning last week. And, with this Bengals team that's pretty light on the interior coming here to Philadelphia because they'll be without Mike Daniels and without Geno Atkins, you would think that is another good matchup for Jason Kelce to get his, get the run game, get the screen game going.
Yeah, I was going to start with, some advantages, and they give up 185 yards on the ground. They do not stop the run, and as you just mentioned, I know Atkins out. I think Daniels might play. He's kind of iffy if he does. He's got a groin problem there, but even if he does, their best player is Atkins on the front of that line, and they have been getting scorched. We've heard a lot about the 12 personnel due to the limits at wide receiver. Is this a heavy run game this week?
Heavy run. Well, what town do you think you're watching football in? What coaching staff do you think this is? Heavy. If you mean heavy run by 45%, then maybe. No, I kid. I do think the run. I don't know how if they're going to lean on it. 20% more than they normally do, but I do think they're going to get a lot more volume out of their run game, a lot more impact runs. And if anybody listened to the Inside the Birds podcast that came out this morning with me and Adam, and we talked about matchups, I picked Miles Sanders to have the best game of all the offensive playmakers. And I think that, you go back to last year in December when they were really hurting at wide receiver, how much they leaned on Miles in both the running game and as a receiver. And even last week, it's another thing we're going to detail on the show. Carson had an opportunity to hit Miles out of the backfield probably 2 or 3 more times than he already did hit him last week, which was, I think, 3 for 35 or 36 in the receiving game. I think Carson's going to come a little bit more crisp, and I really do think Miles Sanders is going to have a big, big game.
Last year we brought up a lot how when the receivers went down, much like this year. Now, they didn't have Deshaun Jackson last year. He's a big difference compared to what they had last year. But they really stripped things down. They went 12 personnel. They simplified things. Do you anticipate seeing something like that again where they really strip it down and they go 80% 12 personnel? Do we even see more of that? But that 12 personnel also helps, exemplify the run game. So is that what we're going to see?
Yeah, I think 80% last week was obviously because of the game plan, as you're mentioning, stabilize the offense, give them some 2 good, reliable, short pattern type targets in Ertz and Goddard. I think they would have liked to have been able to open it up a little bit more this week against the Bengals, especially because the Bengals just don't have a great pass rush and they have a suspect secondary. But with the absence now of Jalen Reagor, putting them in a little bit of a position like last year where, yes, at least you have Deshaun Jackson's speed on one side, but now you might have to have either J.J. Arcega-Whiteside or a mixture of other receivers there to the X position. It kind of forces the issue for Doug to say, I think I have to play this much 12 personnel again because my tight ends are my strength. And I do think the presence of Deshaun Jackson will allow them even in 12 personnel to kind of, work off that play action and try to hit Deshaun deep.
I want to get your thoughts on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside because Doug Peterson did speak and say that, he's going to have to be utilized more. What have you seen out of him through the first 2 games that should leave people optimistic about using him more, or is there no such thing?
Well, Hunter, the screen game hasn't been very good as we've come to expect for the Eagles, at least through 2 games. But I do wonder if Doug Peterson today was throwing his best smokescreen out, saying that we're going to have to rely on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, and he's a guy who can play multiple positions for multiple 2 X and slot. I mean that's great. that's literally one more position to be able to call it multiple. So, and I'm not even sure he's an effective slot receiver yet. So I do question whether Doug is kind of keeping it close to the vest. They only have 4 wide receivers active that we know of. That will be Deshaun, that will be Arcega-Whiteside. It'll be, I assume it'll be Hightower and Greg Ward. Wouldn't surprise me if we see, and we'll find out by 4:00 tomorrow, if Deontay Burnett gets a call up. Because if you go back to last December, when the Eagles really needed some no-name guys to rely on, I think you'd see more catches, more impactful catches from Deontay Burnett than you would from J.J. Arcega-Whiteside.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about this Deontay Burnett, because is this a situation in your mind, Moshe, that Greg Ward didn't get a shot until it was absolutely necessary, and he ended up being a better player than maybe some of the guys they kept due to draft status? Could you see Burnett maybe be a better option than J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, that Arcega-Whiteside only gets the opportunities because of his draft position?
Yeah, I'm not trying to be cavalier, Mike, I swear. But, I mean, yes, of course I could see Deontay Burnett being a more of an option than J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. But that's easy to say because we just have not seen Arcega-Whiteside make any meaningful contribution to this team. I know it's just 2 weeks, but you go back to last year and the struggles there. And I thought last week he had a pretty bad, I guess it was a drop. It wasn't the greatest throw, but for a guy known for making contested catches, he didn't bring one down. I think that was a big 3rd down that he couldn't bring in. And then, of course, didn't run the greatest route on the Carson ball that should have never been thrown anyway. So Burnett's a guy who's contributed to them. He's a USC guy. Those guys tend to be fairly decent route runners in general. He's played for the Eagles now more than a year. He was on the Jets in 2018 also and had 10 catches for 143 yards, right? I mean, that's basically J.J. Arcega-Whiteside production. So I think the Eagles get by on knowing that wide receivers in this league can be a dime of a dozen. And I think it's to their benefit that they have a guy like Burnett on the practice squad who no one's going to run to sign, but at the same time can be called up and can help you.
By no means am I saying Greg Ward is some elite weapon, but could you see a scenario where maybe he is, like last year, he was definitely a piece that helped this team move the chains last year. Is that something that maybe we can see happen Sunday?
It's possible, Hunter. He's normally the slot wide receiver when they're in their 3 wide formations, which obviously they're not in a lot of these days. So it's hard to get him on the field to help them when they're in their 2 tight end packages. However, and this is something, I pay really close attention, but I didn't catch this last year, but apparently Greg Cosell did. Another reason to watch our pregame show is Cosell mentioned that there were times last year that Ward did line up as an outside receiver in 12 personnel. Now, that's not something that the Eagles want to be married to, but every once in a while, because he was dependable, because he can catch the ball, and because he does know how to get open through crafty route running, you can put him at that X spot and maybe have that, you run that like backside slant or dig or, one of the simpler routes that is not down the field and just try to keep the chains moving. So potentially he's someone that they could use there. I think the real question, guys, is after kind of a week 2 benching, do they trust John Hightower to be able to get on the field and try to be another field stretcher? Or is John Hightower still someone that they don't see as a reliable player to have out there?
Talk with Geoff Mosher, Football at 4 here, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Don't forget to check him out tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. for the Inside the Birds pregame show, and that's filled with a lot of great information. Trey Thomas, Greg Cosell, Adam Kaplan, and Geoff Mosher will have that for you. All right, when you look at some of these both teams 0-2, so they both have their problems. Where's an area that if the Eagles are at a disadvantage and concerning, what bothers you about this Bengals team, which, they're better than they were last year, and one of the reasons they were so bad last year, A.J. Green got hurt. He's back. The quarterback got hurt last year, and now obviously they have the first pick. So they're better at two positions than they were a year ago. So where are some disadvantages that worry you?
Well, one disadvantage that has my eye is the matchup between Tyler Boyd, Bengals wide receiver, and Nickel Roby-Coleman, who through 2 games so far has not looked like the Nickel Roby-Coleman that the Eagles thought that they were getting. It's funny because we talk every year. You go into the year and you just know that there are going to be like 3 or 4 players that you have expectations for that are going to fall short. And then there's 3 or 4 players who you think are not going to be good who kind of come into their own. And I don't want to make any premature judgments after 2 weeks, but I think the numbers on Nickel Roby-Coleman are 9 for 9 targets he's allowed and an 150.5 passer rating against him. And that's pretty damning when you consider that one of the 2 teams he's faced were his teammates. So, I mean, you would have thought he at least had a little bit of, knowledge and some of their offense figured out, and he was obviously exposed. And then, you played a Washington team that wasn't very good. And not to say he was the only culprit in that game, but they had some breakdowns in the secondary that led to Washington scoring 3 times in their 4 red zone trips. So Tyler Boyd's a really good receiver. I actually watched about 5 games of tape on him a year ago when I was doing the scouting academy. And what he's really good at is he can play inside or outside. But when he goes inside, he's really good at running that kind of deep post, that vertical post from the slot that you used to see Nelson Aguilar run. And he's very good at kind of just going high to get that ball and catching it between the corner and the safety down the field, hanging on, taking hits. He's a physical receiver. He makes contested catches, and he's a smart route runner, and he's going to probably draw Nickel Roby-Coleman at times. And you have to hope that this is a game where Nickel looks like the Nickel Roby-Coleman that the Eagles thought they were getting, because Joe Burrow has been the real deal. I mean, if there's one thing that's really a surprise with Joe Burrow is that I think he's thrown the ball 97 times already. I think he leads the NFL in pass attempts and second in completions, and he's only thrown 1 interception. So for a rookie, that's pretty darn good, especially when you consider that he didn't have any OTAs and an altered training camp. To throw that many passes and not have that and only have 1 interception shows that the kid is really smart and processes well.
How do you feel about the trenches for the Eagles? Because I look at this matchup and I feel that they could probably win both sides.
Yeah, I mean, this is where you have to think the Eagles have a major, major advantage, Hunter. The offensive line played a much better game last week. As I mentioned, the lack of interior pass rush that the Bengals don't get by not having Geno Sacks out there. They're not particularly Carlos Dunlap is a pretty good edge rusher. He's not bad at all, actually, but he's a guy that should be contained by Lane Johnson and Jason Peters. In general, I do think the offensive line here for the Eagles has a chance to reset the line of scrimmage a lot on runs and really keep Carson well protected. And conversely, the Bengals have a very bad offensive line. Their left tackle, Jonah Williams, pretty good, but the rest of the offensive line, not very good at all. In fact, Joe Mixon it looks like he's having a bad year, but he's just getting hit behind the line of scrimmage a whole lot. And I think that even if Fletcher Cox doesn't play, when you've got Malik Jackson and you've got Javon Hargrave, and Brandon Graham certainly could afford a bounce back from last week, this is an area the Eagles have to dominate.
Yeah, I was going to follow up with, Bobby Hart, not very good. You got Brandon Graham there. That's a matchup that you got to exploit. If you get I know a lot of people have talked about they got good pass rush last week, but if you don't, there's a difference between getting good pressure and dominating up front, just taking them out of everything. And they didn't stop the run very well last week. They had some problems there. If they don't dominate up front after this week, do you start to have legitimate concerns about that defensive front?
Oh, I would think so. I mean, if you're 0-3 and your defensive line, which you're so heavily invested in, isn't getting to the quarterback or struggles again to stop the run, then you start to worry about, well, where did it go wrong? Is it aging? Is it Fletcher Cox, who's hurt and another year older, coming off of a year last year that wasn't great by Fletcher Cox standards? Same thing with Brandon Graham. You worry about that spot opposite Brandon Graham that was supposed to be manned by Derek Barnett. Can he come back strong? You'll obviously have questions about his future if he doesn't look like he makes his mark. With Vinny Curry out, they're going to have to rely on Josh Sweat and Barnett to kind of pick up the pace there. And that's a little bit of a drop-off from what they've had the last few years, even with Vinny. Vinny's a really good run defender as well. I thought that they really missed him last year last week, when they were kind of getting gashed there on some of those runs. So, yeah, you would wonder that. And I think Jim Schwartz would probably get questioned a little bit. This is a game where I think Jim has the opportunity to kind of shake off. I don't think he has to blitz a whole lot because it's not a great offensive line, but don't let Joe Burrow get comfortable. I think he let Goff get too comfortable last week, 8 out of 8, then 9 out of 9, then 10 out of 10. And I heard you earlier in the week, Mike, talking about blitzing and if you don't have good blitzers, and maybe he doesn't blitz because the Eagles don't have great blitzers. And that's a fair point. You and I have kind of gone back and forth on that in the past. I would just say that not the end result of a blitz isn't always have to be a sack. Mm-hmm. It's just to get the quarterback moving off his mark and uncomfortable. So you don't need to be Troy Polamalu, right, to be able to force a little issue on the quarterback. And that's where I thought Jim fell short by not bringing either a guy down on the line of scrimmage. So now you got 5 linemen versus 5 offense for 5 defense, and you can't get those combo blocks to set up play action, or just bringing a guy in late as a blitzer to force Goff when he rolls out to have somebody in his face while he's trying to throw.
Doug Peterson said something today that really stood out to me, and in the grand scheme of things, it might not be the biggest thing in the world, but he did mention the backup quarterback situation, and he was talking about how it might be week to week, and I'm just so confused. I just don't understand. After Hurts was in play last week, they had some gadget plays for him. If that's going to be his role, wouldn't you think that that's going to be his role? I don't know. Is it coach speak? I'm just trying to figure out what they're trying to do with this backup quarterback role.
Well, Hunter, I think normally, Adam and I like to come on here and, give you a pretty good feel for what the team is thinking and direction and a little, share some intel. But I got to admit, on this one, I think Adam and I are both like you and Mike and everyone else, where we just don't kind of understand the philosophy there, and it's just not something that's clear to those who have asked. So I really don't have much other than to wonder about, again, when you take a guy in the second round, there's kind of that pressure from either yourself or you're above or whatever to try to get something out of him and get him on the field. Now, I can't understand why, even if you wanted to use him in a gadget way, why you wouldn't also have Nate Sudfeld active just in case Carson got hurt, unless they were thinking if Carson gets hurt, we're not winning with either Sudfeld or Jalen Hurts, so it doesn't really matter. I'm not caught off guard because sometimes this organization does things that are surprising to me, but this would have to be one of them as well.
Yeah, and didn't Doug say a couple of weeks ago he was asked about 3? Well, why wouldn't you want to have 3 quarterbacks? Well, I haven't seen you use 3 quarterbacks. It's like
exactly
right. It's like, why wouldn't you want 3? Well, you have the opportunity to do it, and you have elected not to. I want to ask you about, because he said we have confidence in JJ. We talked about that. How do you think the reps are split up? Are they going to try? Is this essentially JJ's last shot here to show, hey, we're going to give you full reps, show us whether you are what we thought you were or not?
That's probably going to be the case. I can't say I know it totally, and it wouldn't shock me if they did try to rotate some other guys in there because they've already lost faith in Arcega-Whiteside's ability to play an entire game and make an impact. I mean, he'll clearly get some snaps, I would have to think, because they need guys there. But I don't know if this is good. Look, and if he does get those snaps, I do agree, Mike, he's going to have to do something impactful in them. I don't think they're going to do what they did last year with Mac Hollins, which is what did he go, 7 games without a target? Some kind of crazy historical footnote that eventually led to Mac Hollins, seeing the unemployment line. And I don't even think Mac Hollins is signed anywhere. I'd have to go
He's
look
on
and check
the
that.
Dolphins.
Oh, is he on the? He did last year. Is he still on with them?
I thought so.
I watched the game last night. I don't remember.
Well, I
his
mean,
name at
I don't
all.
think anything's changed, but I think he might be on the team. And by the way, on that point, he is on the Dolphins. Was he active last night? He has 3 games, so he did play last night. He's a special teams guy. But Hightower has 4 targets. Arcega-Whiteside has 2. That's a bad sign.
Wow, it's amazing because Hightower only played 14 snaps, if that, last week against Rams. I mean, I do think Carson wants to trust Hightower more, and I'm sure this week in practice they're trying to develop that relationship as fast as they can. This is a big week for both Carson's coaches and for Aaron Moorhead, the wide receivers coach, to figure out a way to get the Carson and some wide receiver who can play the X on the same page.
All right. By the way, the Bengals offensive line, 6 sacks, 52 pressures. It's the 3rd most in the NFL. This is a matchup that they have to win, but I want to flip it real quick. Joe Mixon's the running back. We know the Eagles linebackers have been terrible. Is that an area that worries you, or is the linebacker play not an issue against this particular matchup?
No, I mean, it's always an issue. It's funny. I was having this exact conversation with a team source recently who said, Mixon versus Riley and Gary. And I said, well, the Bengals offensive line is so bad that I don't even know if Mixon's going to make it to the second level. I mean, the Eagles have a pretty good defensive front line there, and Mixon's been hit so much at the line of scrimmage or behind it that you wonder if it's not even a big deal for the linebackers. But certainly they'll be tested. And then not just in the run game, Mike, but I mean, Zach Taylor is a guy who coached under Sean McVay.
Yep.
And so he's a Sean McVay disciple. And I have to think, because it's a copycat league, that they're going to try to maybe mimic some of the play action and the rollouts that you saw last week the Rams do. And the Bengals probably need to do it even more because of their offensive line. And so the eye discipline, the over pursuit, the things that failed the linebacker crew last week, you would have to think the Bengals would try to capitalize on if they can just kind of be functional.
Yeah, that's something we brought up with Andrew earlier in this week, is that Taylor, does he call his old buddy Sean McVay and say, hey, which one of those plays did really work last week? The one difference is, I think Taylor,
what do you think Sean said? All of them?
Yeah, right, exactly. Every single one. But get your tight end going, even if you don't have one, which obviously they're down a tight end. Who's that? Drew Sample will be the tight end. We'll see how he works out, because Higbee's pretty good. He got you for 3 touchdowns last week. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. The Inside the Birds podcast, it's the premier inside information on the Eagles. They've got a tremendous team with Trey Thomas and Derek Gunn and Adam Kaplan and Greg Cosell, and obviously Jeff tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Make sure you check those guys out. Who wins and why?
I do think the Eagles are going to win. I feel like it's going to be like the Jets game last year, where they're going to win fairly convincingly, but people are still going to leave wondering, what's wrong with this or what's wrong with that. But I do think the Eagles are going to win.
All right,
and dominate the line of scrimmage.
Convincing win, says Geoff Mosher. And we'll see. That's all tomorrow right here on 97.3 ESPN, your home for Eagles football. Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Jeff, you guys are doing a great job with that. If everybody out there has not stumbled upon it yet, make sure you make it a daily. You got something every day of the week now, right?
At least 1, sometimes 2 and 3 things every day of the week.
All right. And, of course, every day right here with the Inside the Birds guys on Football at 4. Have a great weekend, man.
You too, guys. Have a good one.
All right, Geoff Mosher, everybody, here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline and Football at 4. It's brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250.